The name on the maintenance application made Sylvia Crane stop mid-reach for her coffee. She had been moving through the stack the way she always did on Thursday mornings, quickly, efficiently, the way she moved through most things. 43 applications for 2 open custodial positions at Crane Medical Center. HR had flagged 7 of them for various reasons: overqualified, incomplete references. One applicant had listed his previous employer as the universe. Sylvia had set that one aside with something that was almost a smile, but this one HR had flagged differently. A yellow sticky note on the front of the folder. You'll want to see this yourself. The name on the application was Walter Pruitt. Sylvia set down her coffee. She did not reach for it again for a long time. Walter Pruitt arrived at Crane Medical Center on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of October, the kind of morning where the sky over Hamilton sat low and colorless, and the leaves on the maples along Main Street had gone from orange to brown overnight. He was 51 years old. He wore a gray canvas jacket that had been washed too many times and work boots that were clean but visibly old. He carried a small knapsack. He did not look around the lobby the way most new hires did, taking in the atrium, the skylights, the donor wall with its carved stone panels. He walked directly to the facilities desk, gave his name to the young man sitting there, and waited. His daughter had asked him not to take this job. Not in a cruel way. Maisie never did anything cruelly. She had sat across from him at the kitchen table in her apartment in Waterloo 2 weeks before, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking, and she had said, "Dad, you don't have to do this. We have enough." And Walter had said, "I know." And then he had driven back to Hamilton and submitted the application anyway. The young man at the desk, his badge said Tyler, handed Walter a lanyard and a form and told him orientation started at 8:30 in the lower level. Walter thanked him and took the stairs. Sylvia Crane did not attend orientation. She had not attended orientation for a facilities hire in 11 years, and she was not about to start now in a way that would be noticed. Instead, on Walter's 3rd day, she happened to be in the east corridor on the ground floor when he came through with his cart at 7:40 in the morning. She watched him work for 4 minutes without him knowing she was there. He moved the way people move when they have been doing physical work for a long time. Economically, without wasted motion, without the slight performance that people sometimes put on when they think someone might be watching. He paused at the window alcove near room 114, took a cloth from the lower shelf of his cart, and wiped the window ledge without being asked, and without it being on any checklist Sylvia knew of. Then he pushed the cart forward and disappeared around the corner. She stood there for a moment. Then she went back to her office and closed the door. Walter Pruitt had, at the age of 26, been the youngest person ever admitted to the structural engineering program at the University of Waterloo's graduate school. He had spent 4 years there completing a doctorate that his supervisor, a difficult man named Baskin who did not praise easily, had called once-in-a-generation work. He had spent the following decade as a senior structural consultant at a firm in Toronto, then another 8 years running his own practice. At the height of it, he had 41 employees, contracts across 5 provinces, and a reputation in the industry that people in the industry did not need to explain to each other. Then his wife, Carol, got sick. It happened the way it always happened, slowly, then all at once. 2 years of treatment, then a year that was harder, then 8 months that Walter did not talk about, except in the way that he sometimes got very still in the middle of a sentence, and you understood that the sentence was over. After Carol died, he sold the practice to his partner and moved back to Hamilton, where he had grown up and where his daughter lived with her husband and their 2-year-old boy. He had told no one at Crane Medical Center any of this. He had not lied on his application. The employment history section covered the previous 5 years only, and in the previous 5 years he had done small contract work here and there, enough to keep busy, not enough to constitute a career. The section had been filled out honestly. There had simply been no checkbox for also held a doctorate and built half the pedestrian bridges in southern Ontario. The problem in the East Wing became apparent in the 2nd week of November. It started, as these things often did, with a smell. Not a bad smell exactly, more of a mineral dampness, the kind that comes from water finding its way somewhere it should not be. Sylvia got the call from the facilities manager, a broad, careful man named Doug Hebert, on a Wednesday afternoon. Doug thought it was the HVAC system. The contractor they'd brought in thought it was a pipe in the wall. The engineer from the firm Crane had used for 15 years was on sabbatical in Portugal, and his associate had come out twice and twice left without a definitive answer. The damp smell was getting worse. There was a faint discoloration appearing on the ceiling of the corridor between the east wing and the administrative block. Nothing dramatic. But Sylvia had been running this hospital for 9 years, and she had learned to treat not yet dramatic the same way she treated already dramatic. She was standing in the corridor with Doug and the associate engineer, a young woman named Priya, who was clearly capable but clearly also uncertain, when Walter Pruitt came through with his cart. He slowed almost imperceptibly. Sylvia noticed it. Doug did not. Walter continued past them. Then he stopped. He stood with his back to them for a moment. Then he turned around. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't mean to interrupt." He looked at the ceiling, but that discoloration, the pattern of it, I don't think it's coming from the HVAC or a wall pipe. Priya turned. "It's a maintenance issue," she said, not unkindly. "We're handling it. The pattern runs perpendicular to the drain lines," Walter said. He was looking at the ceiling, not at her, and if you look at where it's darkest, it's pulling toward the north corner, not the south. That's not how a pipe leak reads. That's how it reads if there's a problem with the exterior membrane on the north face of the building. 3rd or 4th floor, probably. Water's been traveling down inside the wall. There was a silence. Priya looked at the ceiling. Her expression changed. "The building's 16 years old," Walter said. "The membrane systems from that era in this climate. Hamilton gets a lot of freeze-thaw cycles. They start to fail around this point, especially on north-facing surfaces that don't get much sun to help them dry out." Doug said slowly, "How do you know that?" Walter looked at him. He had the brief, slightly uncertain expression of a man who had just said more than he intended to. "I've just seen it before," he said. He pushed his cart forward and went around the corner. Priya had the north face inspected the following morning. The membrane on the 3rd floor had a breach 18 inches long, concealed behind the brick cladding, invisible from the outside. The water had been traveling for months. Another winter of freeze-thaw cycles, and they would have been looking at significant structural remediation. Doug Hebert told Sylvia about it over the phone. There was a pause in the conversation that Doug, who had known Sylvia for 7 years, recognized as significant. "The custodian," she said. "Walter," Doug said. "I looked him up after. His employment history with us is pretty thin. But I found other things. He had a structural engineering practice in Toronto. Closed it about 5 years ago." Another pause. "Why is he pushing a cleaning cart in my hospital, Doug?" "I don't know," Doug said. "He didn't say." Sylvia did not call Walter into her office. She thought about it and decided that calling him in would be the wrong move. Too formal, too declarative. The kind of summons that put people on the defensive before a word was spoken. Instead, she went to him. She found him in the lower-level service corridor at 6:45 in the morning, before the day shift started, when the hospital was quieter and the corridors had that particular quality of early institutional morning. Lights full on, the distant sound of equipment, no one in the halls. He was refilling his cart from the supply room. He heard her footsteps and turned. He looked at her with no particular surprise, which itself was a kind of information. "I know who you are," Sylvia said. "I figured," Walter said. She leaned against the corridor wall. "I went through your file again after Doug called me. I looked you up properly this time." She paused. "The Guelph Line overpass, the pedestrian bridge at Confederation Park." "Among others," Walter said mildly. "Why are you here?" He was quiet for a moment. He took a supply box from the shelf and set it on the cart. "My wife died," he said, 3 years ago. I closed the practice. I wasn't ready to. I wasn't ready for the level of responsibility that work carries. Not then." He adjusted something on the cart. "My daughter lives here. My grandson is 2. I needed something to do that I could leave at the end of the day." "Custodial work," Sylvia said. "It's honest work," Walter said, not defensively, just as a statement of fact. "I'm not disputing that," Sylvia looked at him. "But I have a facilities team that includes 3 engineers, none of whom caught what you caught in 40 seconds in a corridor." Walter said nothing. "I also have a capital projects backlog that has been sitting at 14 items for 2 years because my director of infrastructure left in the spring, and I haven't found the right person to replace him." She let that sit for a moment. "I'm not trying to recruit you in a service corridor at 6:45 in the morning. I'm telling you that there is a conversation I would like to have. When and if you're ready to have it. And the conversation is about whether there is a version of this work that would make sense to you. Walter looked at her. She was good at reading people. It was the essential skill in her position, and what she saw in his face was not gratitude exactly. It was something more complicated. The expression of a man who had made peace with where he was and was now being asked to consider whether the peace was necessary. "I have a grandson," he said finally. "He's at the age where he needs to be picked up by 3:30. The director of infrastructure position," Sylvia said, "has flexible hours. It has always had flexible hours. Doug Hebert leaves at 2:30 on Fridays because his mother is in a care facility in Ancaster, and he visits her every week." Walter looked at the cart. "I would need to think about it," he said. "Take all the time you need," Sylvia said. She pushed off the wall and walked back down the corridor. At the corner she stopped, because something made her stop, and she turned back. Walter was standing at his cart. He had not moved. He was looking at the supply room shelves in the way a person looks at something when they are not really looking at anything at all. She went back to her office. He took 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, he continued to come in at 6:30. He continued to push his cart through the east corridor and the main floor and the lower level. He continued to say good morning to Tyler at the front desk and to the nurses on the second floor, who had started saving him the good coffee from the staff room, because, as one of them told another, he's just really quiet, but he always remembers your name. He stopped twice more in those 3 weeks and said something about something he noticed. Once about the load rating of a temporary ramp that had been installed outside the south entrance. He mentioned it to Doug in passing, and Doug had it reviewed the same day, and the contractor had to come back and reinforce it. Once about a hairline crack in the stairwell wall near the service entrance that he said was almost certainly cosmetic, but was worth documenting. Both times he said what he had to say, and then went back to what he was doing. On a Thursday morning in the last week of November, Walter Pruitt walked into Sylvia Crane's office. He was wearing his gray jacket, and he was carrying his knapsack. He sat down in the chair across from her desk. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her. "I know," she said. "I want to be clear about a few things." He set the knapsack on his knee. "I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. I work more slowly now. I'm more careful. I'm not interested in the part of this work that's about visibility or reputation or building something with my name on it. That's not what I need," Sylvia said. "I need someone who understands how buildings work and cares whether they work safely." "I care about that," Walter said. "I know you do." She paused. "I watched you work for 4 minutes in the east corridor before you knew I was there. You wiped a window ledge that no one asked you to wipe." He almost smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but she caught it. "My grandson's name is Ben," Walter said. "He has his mother's hair. He likes trucks, and he likes going to the harbor to watch the boats." A pause. "I need to be available to him. That's the condition that isn't negotiable." 3:30, Sylvia said. "And Fridays are yours if you need them." Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. He stood up. He held out his hand and she shook it, and his grip was steady and unhurried, the handshake of a man who had signed a great many agreements and understood what they meant. "I'll need a few weeks to wrap up what I'm doing downstairs," he said. "I don't want to leave Doug without coverage." Sylvia looked at him. "You want to finish out your notice." "I said I'd do the work," Walter said simply. "I'll do the work." He nodded once and walked out. Doug Hebert found out about it 2 days later when Sylvia told him. He stood in her doorway for a moment processing the information. "He never said a word," Doug said. "No," Sylvia agreed. He came in every morning. He did the work." "Yes." Doug thought about this. "You know what he told me once?" I asked him how he was finding the job. "First week, just making conversation." He said, "It's good. The building tells you things if you pay attention." I thought he just meant, when things needed cleaning. Sylvia looked out her office window at the parking structure across the street. The leaves were all down now. The maples were bare gray lines against a white November sky. "He meant it literally," she said. On his last day in the maintenance department, Walter Pruitt finished his route at 7:10. He returned his cart to the supply room and wrote up his end-of-shift log with the same thoroughness he had brought to every shift for 2 months. He noted a flickering ballast on the lower level, a drain cover in the service corridor that was fitting slightly loose, a condensation pattern on the window in the north stairwell that might be worth monitoring through the winter. He left the log on Doug's desk. He walked back to the supply room and stood there for a moment in the quiet of the early morning. The fluorescent light above him hummed steadily. Somewhere in the building, a floor above, he could hear the day beginning, voices, the distant sound of a cart being wheeled across tile, the particular ambient sound of a hospital waking up. He picked up the old mop he'd been issued on his first day and stood there holding it for a long moment. He set it back in the corner. He picked up his knapsack and walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the main floor. Tyler looked up as he crossed the lobby. "Have a good one, Mr. Pruitt." "You too, Tyler," Walter said. He pushed through the front door and walked out into the morning. The air was cold and sharp and smelled of the lake. His truck was parked on King Street, 2 blocks away. He had 3 hours before he needed to pick up Ben from daycare. He walked the 2 blocks with his hands in his pockets and the morning light coming pale and flat off the buildings on either side of the street. And if there was something he was thinking about or feeling, it did not show on his face the way it might have on another man's. He walked the way he always walked, steadily at his own pace, taking up no more space than he needed. He unlocked the truck. He sat in the driver's seat for a moment without starting the engine. Then he took out his phone and called his daughter. "Hey," she said, answering on the second ring, her voice still half asleep. It was not quite 8 o'clock. "Dad? Everything's fine, he said. "I just wanted to hear your voice." He paused. "I start the new job Monday." A silence, then quietly, "Dad." "I know," he said. "Are you okay?" He looked at the street through the windshield. The maples were bare. A woman walked past with a dog. A transit bus moved slowly through the intersection at the far end of the block. "I think so," Walter said. "Yeah, I think I am." He sat there a while longer, listening to his daughter breathe on the other end of the line. And then he started the truck and drove home through the cold November morning to get ready for the day.